I'm starting with a pretty simple scene for this tutorial. I have a maze that I've created, which is essentially just a plane with some cubes that I've turned into walls in a varying pattern. I have one cube which I've attached a rigid body to so that it has gravity and will fall to the ground when the game starts. I have a player which is essentially just a sphere with a rigid body and a player controller script which allows me to move it around using the left, right, up and down arrows of the keyboard. The other script that I have running in this scene at the moment is an instantiate script. So on my main camera I have an instantiate script which will generate 300 of these cubes and spread them out throughout the scene when I press play. This script that we're going to be looking at is how I can create a collision between these two items so that when my sphere touches my cube, the cube disappears. And the way that we can do that is just adding a very simple script to my player controller script. So double clicking our player controller script. So the script that I'll need to add to the bottom of this is a function called OnCollisionEnter. Now this function will work in a script on its own. It'll work in a script that's a lot larger than this. Essentially the function is universal. It allows my player to recognize when it collides with something that has a name. So it's a function, so it starts with the word void on collision enter, and inside my round brackets here I'm going to say collision with other, and then open my action brackets for my function, and in here I can create my script. I do not want this to be private, sorry. So void on collision enter collision with other. Now inside this function I'm going to create all the different scripts to let the program know what to do when I collide with something. So to do this we're going to create an if statement. So on collision enter collision with other. If the other game object has a tag called pickup, then we're going to say other dot game object dot set active false. We close our if statement, we close our OnCollisionEnter function, and we also make sure to close our public class last. It's important to make sure that these bracketing, that you've got all your right brackets in the right area or you will end up with errors. So each function needs to have its own closing bracket. You can't have a function inside a function or you'll get an error. So on collision enter collision with other. If the other game object has compare tag of pickup, then set that other game object to false. So essentially it's just going to disappear. So save this and come back to Unity. And we need to let the computer know what that thing called pickup is. So I want that to be my cube. So if I click on my cube, up here in the top of the inspector, you'll see that there's a tag option here, which at the moment is set to untagged. I have some things that are automatically generated in here by Unity. None of them are the one that I want. So I'm going to choose add tag, click the little plus sign and say pickup. It's important that we use all the right capital letters, all of the right spacing. It needs to be exactly the same as what I've just said it was going to be in the script. And we can now have a look at that list, and pickup is now in the list. So clicking on cube, tag, pickup. So if I play this now, you can see that my cube has generated other cubes because of the instantiate script that I have. my sphere is controllable due to the player controller script, and if I roll into any one of these cubes, they disappear. So that is a really simple way to get your player to interact with other objects in the scene. Now in every script we only actually need one OnCollisionEnter function, and then we can create as many if statements within that as we like. So for example, if I was to create another 3D game object here of a cylinder, and move that cylinder just off to the side, I can add a rigid body to my cylinder so that it also adheres to physics and will fall to the ground with gravity and so forth. And I might tag that one as enemy, making sure that I actually give it that tag that I've just created, enemy. So now within my script, underneath that if statement, I can add another compare tag, and this time I'm going to compare enemy. So if other game object, so if I hit enemy, other .game object set active to false. So at this stage, this is going to do the same thing. Whether I roll into my pickup or whether I roll into my enemy, the other object is going to disappear. If, for example, I wanted my player to disappear when it rolled into the enemy, so I can just change this to say this .game object set active to false. So rather than other game object being set to false, this game object is going to be set to false. So if I roll into my cube, which is tagged pickup, the cube will disappear. If I roll into my cylinder, which is tagged enemy, my sphere or my player will disappear. So saving this, head back into Unity and I can move my cube. If I roll into, I can move my sphere. If I roll here into my cube, it disappears. When I roll into the cylinder, my sphere disappears. So basically inside these OnCollisionEnter if statements, I can place any actions I want. So I could add an action in here to play a sound. I could add an action in here to add a number to a score, or to minus a number from a score, to start a new scene, to go to a game graphical user interface page. So essentially the OnCollisionEnter function will look for one collider colliding with another collider. The if statement then says if that other collider has a name on it called pickup or a name on it called enemy, then do the following instructions. And the instructions that you give Unity are limitless.